Imagine yourself lost in a dark, misty rainforest somewhere in Africa. All around you, the rhythmic beat of tribal drums and eerie chanting echo through the trees. Suddenly, a massive bonfire appears, surrounded by warriors with faces painted in blood-red colors. This is the classic image Hollywood has always used to depict cannibal tribes. For hundreds of years, these terrifying stories have struck fear into the hearts of people worldwide. Rumors claim that deep in the jungle, some tribes hunt and eat any outsider who steps into their land. But in the 21st century, do these terrifying tribes actually still exist? Or is it all just an exaggeration cooked up by Western media? What is the shocking truth behind these long-standing rumors? Why has Africa always been tied to this savage and brutal stereotype? Today, we are going to open one of the darkest files in human history. We will journey deep into the remote wilderness to find a definitive answer. Is there really a dark world where humans hunt their own kind for food? Let's unmask the truth together in today's video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss our next wild adventures. To understand the truth, we must travel back in time to the colonial era of the 18th century. This was when white explorers first set foot on the resource-rich continent of Africa. They wanted to seize the land, mine the gold, and force the natives into slavery. However, this brutal invasion needed a righteous justification to fool the rest of the world. And so, fabricated stories of the land of the cannibals were born. Western newspapers at the time constantly published illustrations depicting native tribes as bloodthirsty monsters. They described African people as savages who enjoyed drinking blood and eating human flesh. This media propaganda strategy was a massive success for the colonizers. It instantly turned a brutal invasion into a noble, civilizing mission. They gave themselves the moral right to save wild tribes from their own ignorance. Famous anthropology professor William Ahrens later exposed a shocking fact about this era. He revealed that almost none of these Western explorers had ever actually witnessed cannibalism. Everything they wrote in their journals was based on hearsay from local guides. Or even worse, it was entirely made up to boost the sales of their sensational travel books. Therefore, the myth did not originate from actual practices within Africa. It was born from the greed and prejudice of foreign invaders. They successfully rebranded an entire continent of rich cultures into a symbol of horror. This historical smear campaign lasted for centuries. It became deeply ingrained in the public mind through horror novels and movies. But if it was all a lie, why did scientists eventually find actual evidence of cannibalism? The answer is, cannibalism did exist in history, but its meaning was completely misunderstood. Anthropologists divide this phenomenon into two completely different categories. The first type is eating enemies out of hatred or during times of extreme starvation. The second type, which was more common in ancient tribes, is called endocannibalism. This was never about hunting humans as an everyday food source. On the contrary, it was a deeply sacred and solemn spiritual ritual. When a beloved family member or a respected chief passed away, the tribe gathered. Instead of burying the body, they would cremate it or perform a special ceremony. Then, the living relatives would consume a small portion of the ashes or flesh of the deceased. To them, this act was not cruel or gruesome at all. They truly believed that through this, the soul and strength of the dead would live on forever. The deceased loved one would be safely protected inside the bodies of their living family. They couldn't bear the thought of their ancestors rotting in the cold ground or being dug up by wild animals. It was a profound expression of love, respect, and ultimate spiritual connection. This behavior is miles apart from the savage human hunting we see in movies. On the other hand, some tribes only consumed a small part of a defeated enemy to gain their bravery. For example, they believed eating the heart of a great warrior would make them stronger in battle. These rituals were extremely rare and only occurred on very specific occasions. We cannot judge an ancient religious ritual by the standards of modern everyday violence. Looking at these ancient customs through a modern lens has created a massive misunderstanding. However, Africa's modern history has indeed witnessed some incredibly dark chapters. But these horrific events had nothing to do with the culture of innocent tribes. They were the monstrous crimes of corrupt dictators and ruthless rebel groups. Take Idi Amin, the infamous dictator of Uganda during the 1970s. The world labeled him the cannibal tyrant due to his unimaginable cruelties. Many sources allege that Idi Amin kept the body parts of his political enemies in his personal refrigerator. In fact, he even made shocking jokes to the international press regarding these rumors. Another dark chapter unfolded during the bloody civil war in Liberia in the 1990s. Some rebel leaders, most notably a warlord nicknamed General Butt Naked, openly confessed to atrocities. They forced child soldiers to participate in cannibalistic rituals before heading into battle. Their goal was to use dark superstitions to completely terrorize their opponents. They wanted to create such psychological horror that the enemy would surrender without fighting. These warlords believed that being ruthlessly cruel would grant them ultimate power and immortality. But we must look at these events with fairness and objectivity. These insane acts were war crimes, born from the total decay of humanity during wartime chaos. They do not represent the lifestyle, morals, or traditions of the general African population, just as we cannot blame the entire German population for the atrocities committed by Hitler. The madness of a few power-hungry individuals should never define a whole continent. Our natural fear has simply been manipulated by these rare, extreme cases. So, at this very moment, do any isolated tribes still practice this? The definitive answer from modern scientists is a resounding no. Today, there is not a single active cannibal tribe anywhere on the African continent. Famous tribes like the Maasai, the Himba, or the Zulu live very peaceful and structured lives. They live in harmony with nature, herding cattle and practicing agriculture. In fact, many of these tribes have opened their villages to welcome tourists from all over the world. If you travel to Africa today looking for a cannibal tribe to explore, you will fail. The only thing you will actually receive is warm smiles and incredible hospitality from the locals. Those terrifying horror stories now only belong on Hollywood cinema screens. Realistically, if one wants to find tribes that still hold on to such ancient taboos, they must look elsewhere. It would be places like the completely isolated North Sentinel Island in the Indian Ocean, or perhaps a few uncontacted groups deep within the dense jungles of Papua New Guinea. But even in those remote places, local governments banned and phased out these practices long ago. Thus, we finally have a complete answer to our mystery today. The myth of cannibal tribes in Africa is largely a heavily exaggerated fiction. It is a mix of outdated colonial prejudice and sensational modern media. The wild world certainly has its own harsh and unfamiliar rules, but humans, no matter where they are, ultimately lean toward humanity and love. Understanding the true culture of these tribes helps us break down the walls of irrational fear. Let us look at the world with curiosity and respect instead of unfair judgment. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey to uncover the historical truth. What are your thoughts on today's revelation? Please leave your comments down below so we can discuss it together. If you found this video informative and engaging, please give us a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more mysteries. Goodbye, and see you all in our next exciting exploration.